everyone. Welcome to today's episode of Candid Kaya. Today, I am here with my friend Londyn, and we are going to be talking about how you can one day become a consultant. Stay tuned. It's all coming up next. So, hello, Londyn.
Hi.
Thank you so much for coming on today's episode. Let's start with letting the viewers know a little bit about yourself.
Okay, my name is Londyn. I'm 26 years old. I'm originally from Houston, Texas. Grew up in Southern California. Went to USC for undergrad, right on. And I'm currently living in Atlanta, Georgia, and I work for a healthcare consulting firm.
Okay. So tell us a little bit about why you chose a career in consulting.
So my undergraduate degree is focused in health policy. So coming out of USC, I wanted to work in healthcare. I wasn't necessarily looking for a consulting firm at the time, but the people that I met throughout the recruiting process were just so warm and so welcoming. Kind of talked a little bit about the culture and the team dynamic of the consulting world. So I would say the people is what really drew me to consulting.
Okay. All right, so it's not like you went to college like, oh, I want to be a consultant.
No, I don't even think I knew what that was.
Me neither. I
don't think I knew that was a thing until recruiting came around and all these consulting firms were on campus. No, I was pretty much like, I want to do something in healthcare. And I think for me, consulting was a good way for me to apply a little bit about what I learned in undergrad, but see a little bit more of the business aspect and just gain some exposure to the industry.
Okay. So speaking of that, you work in the healthcare industry.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so what other industries do consultants work in?
I would say what industries do consultants not work in? Just about every industry, I would say. Oil and gas, chemical engineering, mechanical engineering, aerospace, any sorts of finance, pretty much every industry I would see that you could find consultants in.
So it's a pretty universal role.
I think so. And a lot of the bigger firms, they have different sectors that they focus in. So depending on how your project rotations go or whether they want you to specialize in a certain industry, you might get exposure to quite a few different industries throughout your tenure.
Okay. All right, cool. So what type of qualities do you think make a good consultant?
I would say communication is key. So
Okay.
learning how to talk to people of all levels. So on any given day, you might be talking to a CFO at some company or a brand new hire that's on your team that you're responsible for training. So having strong communication skills. I would also say being a quick learner. The learning curve for some of those projects can be pretty steep. So being able to retain information and kind of quickly learn how to apply that will make you a strong consultant. And analytical skills.
Okay.
Having strong data analytical skills will take you very far, I think, in the consulting world.
All right. So that leads into my next question. What type of background do most consultants have? Of course, they have a bachelor's degree, I assume.
Yes.
Okay.
Bachelor's degree. Some come in with MBA or some sort of master's degree. It kind of depends on the firm. Some of them will prefer a background in business or finance or marketing or something of that nature.
Okay.
My firm in particular takes people from all different sorts of backgrounds just because diversity of thought is really important, and a lot of the work that we do, you're trained on really early, so they don't expect you to come in knowing anything about healthcare consulting because
Okay.
what 22-year-old does. So they spend a lot of time training and developing you.
So Londyn, one thing that I've always thought about consultants is that they have no life because they're always traveling and, working long hours. So tell me, is that one of the biggest misconceptions about consulting?
I would say that's partially true.
Okay.
Depending on the firm and kind of your role at the time. But for typical consultants, you're usually traveling Monday through Thursday. So if you're the type of person who likes to grab dinner and wine with a friend on Tuesday night, probably not going to happen. But I would say most firms do try and have you home for the weekend. So you might fly in late Thursday night. You may or may not have to go into the office on Friday, but if you choose to be social on the weekends, you could have a life. Some people, like myself, like to stay in bed all weekend. So yes and no, I wouldn't necessarily say that's a misconception altogether.
Okay. All right. So going back to what you were saying, wine and dinner with friends, you don't get to do that as much. So what is a typical day in the life of a consultant?
So I would say that really depends on your client and your engagement at the time.
Okay.
If you are on a heavy travel project, first thing Monday morning, you're probably catching a flight to go wherever your client is if they're not in town. Depending on your role and kind of like seniority, I would say the higher tenure you are, or the more tenured you are, the more client-facing you are. So you might be spending a little bit more time with your clients trying to implement whatever sort of processes you guys kind of have in play. As a newer consultant, you might be spending a little bit more time crunching numbers, kind of in the details, running some reports, things of that nature. But in general, I would say just be prepared to work in a collaborative environment. Usually you're working with teams towards a common goal, which is kind of nice. So depending on how your team likes to divide responsibilities will determine what your day-to-day looks like.
Okay. All right. So what is the most rewarding part about your job?
So for me specifically, I think you kind of have to think big picture, knowing that you're helping an organization, and the organizations we help happen to be hospitals. So I know that we're helping them help people, and that can kind of get lost, I think, in the day to day. But when you kind of remember why you're there and why they're bringing you in, you offer an expertise that they can benefit from.
Right.
So knowing that you're bringing something to the table that's ultimately helping them carry out their mission, I think is really rewarding.
Okay. Now I got to hit you with what's the most challenging part about your job?
Ooh, okay. Well, for some people who travel pretty often, that can be very challenging.
Right.
It can be very exhausting. Luckily, I don't travel as much anymore, so I don't necessarily have that piece of it. But sometimes just navigating the complexities of your clients' processes can be kind of challenging. Getting them to implement some recommendations that you make can be challenging, just because depending on your audience, they might have different priorities at play. So kind of just working with them and trying to figure out what's important to them, so that you can make sure you're delivering results that that they can see are beneficial.
Okay. So, as a young Black woman, has your consulting experience been different, and if so, in what way?
That's a good question. That's a really good question. I mean, it would be hard to say how different it is from someone who's not a young Black woman, because I don't know what their experience has been like. But I think just the same as you would have in any industry where you're a minority and you might be at a table of, C-suite executives who don't look like you. And I think that just in general, if you're not used to it, can be kind of intimidating. But I think if anything, it's helped me remember that, I have a seat at the table for a reason, so I have something to offer, and to not be intimidated by a room full of potentially white males who don't look anything like me.
Right.
But knowing that, like, hey, they value my opinion, so let me make sure that, I speak up and I don't shrink back, and that, I am the woman that I am and I have something to offer.
So, Londyn, now I want to get just a little bit of your advice. What advice do you have for someone who is debating whether or not consulting is right for them?
Good question. I would say think about what you want to get out of your career. I would say think about some of the things we talked about earlier, being travel. Are you willing to travel? That's something that I would say you probably will get asked in any sort of application or interview for consulting, is willingness to be away from home. So if you can handle that, do you work well with others, or are you someone who likes to work independently? And going back to communication, do you have strong communication skills? Do you get nervous, or do you shy, or shrink away from people of authority? And I would also say make sure you hone your technical and analytical skills. It will make your day-to-day a lot easier. You'll be able to move through your workload a lot more efficiently when you are technically savvy.
Okay. All right. So what advice do you have for someone who is preparing for an upcoming interview to become a consultant?
Practice. Practice. You'll hear a lot about the case study interviews, and they differ from firm to firm. So I would say learning how to think critically, because that's really what they're trying to get out of those sort of interviews is how do you think, what's your thought process? You know, if my client poses a question to you, how do you logically, break down what it is that they're asking, alongside of understanding their process and come up with a solution for them. So critical thinking, which is not something you can go study up on. You kind of have to practice it, and there's lots of resources out there. So I would say practice your case studies.
All right. Okay, next piece of advice. What advice do you have for someone who is maybe early, mid-career, and is interested in consulting but has no experience?
Well, I would say look at the experience that you do have. We kind of talked about some of the skill sets that are valuable for a consultant.
Right.
So just because you have no experience consulting doesn't mean that you're not qualified.
Right.
You probably have some sort of industry experience, which might make you a very attractive applicant for a firm who has a sector in whatever industry you may be in. And then think about what skill sets you bring to the table that would make you a good consultant. And just make sure that you sort of pitch yourself that way, or that's not the word I want to say.
Position yourself.
There you go. Position yourself that way, so that they can see that, hey, I might not have any experience, but the skills that I do have are transferable, and this is why it would be great at your firm.
All right, Londyn, my last question is just what are your 3 best tips to becoming a successful consultant?
Okay, so I would say tip number 1 is learning how to work with others. Part of that, I think, is learning yourself, learning what strengths you have and what weaknesses you have and how that fits into a team environment. Tip number 2 is be a good problem solver. Learn how to think critically. Your clients are hiring you to solve problems for them. So learning how to do that efficiently is going to make you successful. And 3, kind of tying into that, is having strong analytical skills. You're going to need to be able to analyze data to make those recommendations to your clients. So the more you can hone in on those analytical skills, the more well supported your recommendations will be, and the more effective you'll be as a consultant.
All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we just heard tips to success from Londyn. So if you guys have any questions or comments, just leave them below and we'll make sure that they get answered. And we hope you all enjoyed today's interview. We'll see you next time.